The following video instruction is intended to provide detailed directions to successfully rebuild a rapid air feed. However, because of the precision parts and intricacies of assembly, Rapid Air recommends that you return it to the factory for a quick turnaround. The purpose of this video is to visually demonstrate techniques and practices which we have found helpful in reconditioning and maintaining rapid air feeds. There are many different sequences that can be used, but we have found that the steps used in this video are useful in learning to do the job easily and efficiently. It will be easier to follow the instructions in this video if you place an exploded parts list in a suitable location for quick reference purposes. A parts list is included with the Rapid Air O-ring kit and with the Rapid Air repair kit. The Rapid Air O-ring kit contains all of the O-rings needed for the repair of the particular model designated. The Rapid Air repair kit contains all O-rings, wiper seal, snap rings, and the appropriate pilot-operated valve and poppet. We recommend that one of these kits be available before beginning any reconditioning of a Rapid Air feed. We have found the following tools to be helpful for an efficient disassembly and repair of Rapid Air feeds. Hex wrench set, internal and external snap ring pliers, sharp bent hook for removal of snap rings, small brass head hammer, Rapid Air cartridge removal tool, selection of fine grit emery paper, screwdriver, sockets, small amounts of thin grease, crescent wrench, seal drivers, and air guns. Is a typical Rapid Air feed to be cleaned and reconditioned. Before any disassembly is performed, the feed must be disconnected from any air supply. To allow free movement of the feed during disassembly, remove all connecting hoses. Begin disassembly by removing the snap ring holding the main actuation valve in place and pulling the valve from its socket. Remove the O-ring from the actuation valve cavity. Remove the snap ring holding the main valve stem and remove the cap. Remove the O-ring from the main valve. To remove the guide rails, take out the screws which hold each guide rail to the main body. Next, remove the stop block clamps by removing the screws holding the guide rails to the stop block. There are 2 screws on each side of the feed. You may have to tap the stop block clamp to separate the parts. Tap out the guide rails from the slot, remembering that there is an unseen dowel pin holding the parts in place. It is now a simple job to remove the slide block main piston subassembly by removing the snap ring holding the parts of the main body. After removal of the snap ring, pull the main piston from the main body by pulling on the slide block. If the feed has cushioned pistons, take them out by removing the snap ring holding them in position and pulling on the end of the cushioned piston. After removal, push the piston out of the retainer. Remove the O-rings on the inside and outside of the retainer. Loosen and remove the nuts holding the stock clamp to the stock clamp pistons. Rotation of these parts is prevented by the square shoulder on the piston and the flat sides for the stock clamp. Repeat this process for the nuts on the feed clamp. When the clamps are removed, notice the position of the height adjustment washers. Also, set the feed clamp springs aside when removing the feed clamp. Next, remove the snap rings holding the stock piston retainers in the main body and pull the stock clamps and retainers from the main body. Remove the feed clamp pistons from the side block by pushing them out the bottom of the side block. Remove the O-rings from the stock clamp piston cavities. Remove the O-rings from the inside and the outside of the stock clamp piston retainers. The cartridge and the control tube are removed from the end of the main body opposite of the main piston. Remove the snap rings holding these parts in position. Pull the control tube from the main body. Remove the cartridge retainer by pulling on the knob provided for this purpose. Removal of the cartridge is facilitated by use of a cartridge pulling tool available through rapid air distributors. Remove the O-rings from the cartridge. Remove the poppet and pilot operator valve from the cartridge by pushing into the small hole on the end of the cartridge. It is important to remove the snap ring that is located in the main body near the bottom of the cavity for the control tube. This will allow removal of the main piston sleeve. Remove the two O-rings on the outside of the control tube head. Carefully grasp and remove the main piston sleeve. Make a visual check and remove the O-rings from all main body cavities. A bent hooked tool will make this a simple job. Take the slide block and main piston assembly and remove the set screw located on the bottom center of the slide block. Next, loosen and remove the main cushion bolt. Now slide the main piston through the slide block far enough to expose the shaft retainer. Loosen and remove the shaft retainer by using two wrenches and the flats on the main piston. The main piston will now pull through the slide block. Remove the snap ring, the retainer, and the wiper seal from the main piston. Remove the O-rings from the inside and outside of the main piston head. Remove the quad ring on the inside and O-ring on the outside of the main piston retainer. Remove the O-rings from the inside of the slide block. Remove the O-rings from the feed clamp cavities. Remove the O-rings from the pilot-operated valve. Wash all parts with an appropriate cleaner and degreaser and then inspect. Check all the polished parts for scratches, dents, or nicks. Check the control tube. Check both the small diameters and large diameters of the feed clamp pistons and the stock clamp pistons. Use a very fine emery cloth to smooth and polish all parts. If there are deep gouges, it may be necessary to order new replacement parts to maximize the O-ring life. Inspect the entire length of the main piston shaft. Inspect the inside of the main piston sleeve for deep scratches. Polish if necessary and replace the sleeve if it is heavily rusted or scratched. Also check the inside of the cartridge for wear. Inspect the guide rail slots in the slide block. If these slots are worn more than 15 thousandths of an inch, then the slide block should be replaced. Proper clearance is 4 to 10 thousandths. Check the underside of the feed clamp and stock clamp surface. Burrs on the strip stock being fed will often gouge the surface. Usually these surfaces can be smooth so they are functional, but if the parts are badly worn, they should be replaced. Check to see the rear cushion pistons will slide easily through the small hole in the rear cushion bolt. The main piston shaft retainer has a plug installed to regulate the amount of air compression resulting at the end of the retraction cycle of the feed. This plug consists of a pin in the middle of the shaft retainer with a flat to limit the airflow. If the resulting opening becomes plugged, the rear cushion piston will not move properly. Press out the plug, clean and carefully reinstall. Check for a slight amount of airflow after completion. Make a visual check of the main actuation valve and the valve cap. Any broken parts must be replaced. Check the main body carefully for any damage, including broken or worn snap ring grooves, excessive O-ring groove wear, and any other physical damage. Repair any damage or replace the main body if the damage is too great to be reliably repaired. Check the cartridge hole for scratches that could cause air leakage. Also inspect control tube head counterbore for any grooves caused by movement of the control tube head as the feed cycles. Lay out the repair kit and parts in a convenient order. As mentioned before, the rebuild kit includes O-rings, snap rings, wiper seal, pilot-operated valve and poppet, basically everything included for the normal rebuild. Lubricate the O-rings and seals as much of the inside surfaces of the feed body and parts with a small amount of white grease or number 10 weight paraffin-based hydraulic oil. Be cautious that only a small amount of grease is used, since excessive amounts can clog the air passages in the feed. Begin with the cushion piston subassembly. Replace the O-rings on the inside and outside of the retainers. Replace the O-rings on the outside of the cushion pistons and slide the cushion piston into each retainer. Slide the cushion piston subassembly into the main body, remembering that the flat side of the snap ring always faces outward. Push the retainer firmly into the cavity and replace the snap rings. Replace the O-rings inside and outside of the main piston. Replace the sleeve O-ring. Slide the sleeve into the main body from the cushion piston end, paying special attention to the dowel locator in the back of the main body. Line the notch up on the sleeve with the pin when installing and turn the sleeve back and forth slightly to make sure the pin is engaged. On the top of the main body, on the wear plate side, replace the O-rings in the stock clamp piston cavities. Then replace the O-rings on the stock clamp pistons and the stock clamp piston retainers.
outside.
Push the stock clamp piston subassembly into each cavity and place the snap ring into each groove.
Stock line pistons.
Now turn the feed to the control tube and cartridge end of the feed. Install the lower snap ring in the control tube cavity.
Rings on.
Replace the O-rings in the control tube head.
Slipping
Place the control tube subassembly into the main body and install the snap ring.
snap ring. Put the O-rings
The
on.
cartridge has 4 O-rings on the outside diameter. Put these in place.
The O-rings on the
Next, replace the O-rings on the pilot-operated valve. Lightly sand the mold mark on the poppet to prevent a small amount of leakage out of the exhaust hole. Install the grooved end of the poppet into the cartridge first. Then install the pilot-operated valve into the cartridge and install the subassembly into the feed main body by lightly greasing the cartridge and the cartridge cavity in the main body, and then gently push it in while turning the part back and forth. This will lessen the chance of tearing the O-rings. Next, take the pilot-operated valve retainer and O-rings, slip the O-ring on the retainer, put the retainer into the cavity and press it into place. Then install snap ring to hold the assembly in the main body. The slide block and main piston assembly are next. Begin on the wear plate side by installing the O-rings in the small diameter holes. Next, install the O-rings in the large diameter holes on the opposite side of the block. On the main piston side of the slide block, install the O-ring in the narrower O-ring groove in the main piston cavity. In this cavity there are 2 grooves. The top groove and the narrower of the 2 is where the O-ring goes. Deeper in the cavity there is a much larger groove that is an air passage which does not get an O-ring. Take the feed clamp pistons and press them in place in the slide block. Square up the broached ends, then flip the slide block over and install the springs and the feed clamp. Make sure that the springs line up with the counterbore on the feed clamp. Install the washers and nuts and tighten the assembly. Install a quad ring on the inside and an O-ring on the outside of the main piston retainer. Then install the wiper seal. Slide the main piston retainer and then the wiper seal on the main piston. Position the snap ring around the main piston so that it will face out when installing the slide block into the main body. Next, assemble the main piston into the slide block. Push the main piston through the slide block so that a wrench can be engaged on the exposed flats. Now install the main piston shaft retainer, then push the assembly back into the slide block and install the cushion bolt. Install the O-ring around the diameter of the cushion piston and slide it into the cushion bolt. Make sure that the parts move freely. Slightly grease the threads on the cushion bolt so there is no possibility of seizing. Tighten the bolt in place. At this point, remember to tighten the set screw on the bottom of the slide block. Lightly lubricate the main piston, control tube, and main piston cavity. Install the main piston into the main body by pushing on it lightly until the retainers and wiper seals drop into place. We use what we call a half moon. This is a piece of metal which we have fabricated in-house to help push the retainers down into the body. You could also use a small punch or screwdriver carefully. Then install the snap ring. Position the flats on the stock clamp pistons with the slots on the stock clamp and assemble the parts. Note that the washers are placed in their original position. Install and tighten the stock clamp nuts. Install the guide rails and stop block.
Stop block on. Stop block clamp. Both screws. Bring it over and repeat everything.
Now reassemble the main actuation valve by beginning with the quad ring for the head. Then assemble the two snap rings that hold the cap and retainers in place.
Slipping it into the cap. Small O-ring in the cap.
Insert the cap and snap the ring into place by pulling back on the cap.
Snap it into place.
Install an O-ring inside the actuation valve cavity at the first step in the main body. Place the main actuation valve into the main body and secure the snap ring in place. Double check the security of this snap ring by pulling outward on the main valve.
Popping into place.
Double check all snap rings, nuts, and bolts. Then put air to the feed and check for leaks. Using the adjusting screw, check the overall function of the feed both fast and slow. If there are no problems, it has been a successful rebuild.